The hospital corridor smelled the way all hospital corridors smell after midnight. Antiseptic, trying to cover up something sweeter that nobody wanted to name. Daniel Mercer pulled his jacket tighter, walked past the vending machines with the buzzing light, and pushed open the glass doors without turning around. Behind him, in room 412, his wife was dying. In front of him, in the pickup lane, Margot was waiting in a champagne-colored SUV with the engine already running. If stories like this tear at something inside you, hit subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment before we go any further. Not because I asked, because you stayed. And the people who stay are the ones this story is really for. He opened the passenger door. Margot didn't say hi. She just looked at him like he was something she'd already decided to keep. "You okay?" she asked. Yeah, he wasn't. She reached across the console and squeezed his hand. Her ring caught the streetlight. Silver, not gold. He'd noticed it the first night and pretended he hadn't, because noticing would have meant asking, and asking would have meant answers, and answers would have meant everything he was about to do. "Drive," he said. She drove. 20 minutes outside of Raleigh, the highway turned dark. Tree lines on both sides, packed tight like a crowd. The kind of dark where you couldn't tell if your headlights were even working. Daniel's phone sat face down on his thigh. He'd turned the ringer off 2 hours ago, before he walked into the hospital, before he kissed Ava on the forehead and told her he'd be back before sunrise, before he watched her close her eyes and try to believe him in a way he no longer deserved. She had tried so hard to believe him. The SUV hummed. Margot had the heater on too high. She always ran the heater too high. Ava ran it too low. Ava always opened the window in January because she liked the cold on her face when she slept. It was one of 1,000 small, ordinary things about her that he had memorized without trying, and would now, he understood, lose forever. "Hey," Margot said, "you're not going back tonight, right?" "You said." "I said." "Then stop." "Stop what?" "Checking. Your hand keeps going to your pocket like the phone's going to ring." He moved his hand back to the seat. 3 months earlier, in March, Daniel had been standing in a half-finished kitchen in a $500,000 house when Margot walked in for the showing. She wore a black blazer and no smile, and she looked at the crown molding like she already knew it wasn't level. He liked that. He liked someone who saw things. He didn't call her. A week later, she called him about a hairline crack in the master bath, and they talked for 45 minutes about nothing. Which is how you know. By April, they were meeting for coffee. By May, they were staying late. By June, Ava was losing weight and pretending not to. He told himself, and this is the part he would never, ever forgive, that he wasn't leaving Ava. He was leaving the dying of her. He'd watched his mother die in a room just like this one when he was 12, sitting in a plastic chair that smelled like peroxide, holding her hand and pretending he wasn't crying. And the sound of the machines had been living inside his head ever since, a faucet that wouldn't shut off all the way. Every IV beep in 412 was the same beep. Every shift change was the same shift change. He was 12 again, and his mother was gone, and he was not going to do that again. So he told himself a story, that Margot was the future, that he deserved a future, that what he was doing was hard but honest, and that if he just got far enough away from room 412, the drips would stop. The sound would finally stop. He had never been more wrong about anything, with anyone, in his entire life. Margot pulled into the driveway of her townhouse. New build. Everything still smelled like fresh paint and decisions. She killed the engine and looked at him. "I need you to do something for me this weekend," she said. "Okay." "I need you to sign the separation papers. I want to file next week." He looked at her. "This weekend?" he said. "Before Monday." He could feel the heat from the vents on his knuckles. He didn't move. "Why the rush?" he said. even though he already knew why the rush. Because I'm not going to be the woman in the parking lot of a hospital while your wife is inside. I'm not going to keep meeting you at coffee shops and pretending we're not what we are. If you want me, Daniel, you have to choose me. Out loud, on paper, in front of a lawyer. He felt the sentence land in his chest like a small, neat bullet. Margot. Don't say my name like that. You know what I'm asking. He did know. He'd known it since the first night. She'd laid it out between them like a hand of cards, and he had pretended he didn't see the Queen of Spades sitting in the middle. He opened the door. "What are you doing?" she said. "I need air." "Daniel, it's freezing." He stepped out anyway. She didn't follow. She was the kind of woman who didn't follow. He walked to the end of the driveway and stood on the sidewalk. The Christmas lights on the neighbor's porch blinked out of sync. There was a wreath on the door with a single red bow, half uncurled, like nobody had cared enough to fix it. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and looked at the screen for the first time in hours. 3 missed calls, all from the hospital. 1 voicemail. He didn't press play. Not yet. He just stood there and let the cold take him, because he owed it to himself to feel something before he let himself feel everything. He pressed play. It was Ruth, the night nurse. She'd been with Ava every Tuesday and every Thursday for 9 weeks. She had a voice like someone who'd seen enough and decided to be kind anyway. The voice of a woman who had held other people's hands at the end and didn't pretend it didn't cost her something. The voice of a woman who had held other people's hands at the end and didn't pretend it didn't cost her something. "Mr. Mercer, Ava's awake. She's been asking for you for the last hour. Not frantic, just steady. She said to tell you she's not in pain. She said to tell you she's ready whenever you are. Call me back when you get this." He lowered the phone slowly. Margot's SUV was already gone. The street was empty. The townhouse windows behind him were dark. He thought about his mother, about the way the beeping sounded when he was 12 and holding her hand and pretending he wasn't crying. About how after she was gone, the faucet had started dripping in his head and never stopped, and how he'd spent 35 years trying to twist it shut with whatever woman was nearest, and how it had never worked, and how he had known, somewhere underneath it all, that it was never going to work this way. He thought about Ava, who had heard the same faucet, who had never once asked him to fix it. He started walking. He didn't drive. He just walked. Mile after mile past the closed strip malls and the dark gas stations and the sleeping houses of people who didn't know what was happening to him. Past the Mexican restaurant where Ava had once spilled a margarita on her white blouse and laughed so hard she cried. Past the school zone where she'd taught Sunday school, where a 6-year-old named Lily had given her a drawing of a yellow house with a red door, and Ava had framed it and stood it on the kitchen counter for years. 3 miles. 4. 5. By the 6th mile, his hands were numb. By the 7th, his phone had died. By the 8th, the hospital was in front of him, glowing pink against the sky. The vending machine light was still buzzing. He took the elevator. 4th floor. Oncology. The hallway was quiet except for one of those clocks that ticked too loud, the way some clocks do in places where you've lost time already. A nurse at the station looked up, then looked down. She didn't ask him where he'd been. She'd been there long enough to know. Room 412. The door was half open, a thin bar of yellow light across the floor. He pushed it. Ava was awake, sitting up a little, propped on 2 pillows that didn't match. She was pale, but the kind of pale that still had color in it. She had that same look she'd had at their wedding, when she'd walked down the aisle of that small church in Charleston and seen him and decided, in front of everyone, not to be afraid. She smiled. "You're back," she said. "I'm back. Where were you?" He looked at her. He could have lied. He had lied all night. "Riding around," he said. It was barely a lie. "With her?" He didn't answer. She nodded to herself, like she'd been waiting for the confirmation, and was almost relieved it had finally come. like a diagnosis she'd suspected and finally let herself say out loud. "Sit down," she said. "You're making me nervous standing there. You look like a character in a film who doesn't know the lines yet." He almost laughed. He sat. He pulled the chair close. He held her hand. Her hand felt like a bird's hand. He hated himself in a way he didn't yet have a word for. "How do you feel?" he said. "Like I'm on fire, and I'm not on fire. Like I'm not in my body, and I'm in my body. Like I'm 32 and 82 at the same time. Would you like me to keep going?" "Stop. I'm going to stop in a minute. I want to do one more impression. Ava." "Shh. Let me do the bit." She closed her eyes for a second, opened them, and did a face. "This is what I look like when the nurse is taking too long. This is what I look like when you forgot the ice chips. This is what I look like." She coughed. The cough went on too long. He held her shoulder. Ruth came in with a glass of water and a look that told Daniel, gently and without saying it, that this was closer to the end than Ruth had told him on the phone. That the "ready whenever you are" in the voicemail had meant something specific, something she wasn't allowed to say. Ava drank. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She'd always done that. Even on their honeymoon, she'd done that. He'd teased her about it the first morning, sleepy and hungover, sitting on the balcony in a robe that was too big. She'd tossed a pillow at his head. He'd kept the pillow for years. It was still on the shelf in the hall closet. He was going to have to take it down someday. "Ava," he said. Don't," she said. "Whatever you're about to say, don't." "I have to say something." "You don't. Whatever it is, I already did the math. I did it in February. I want to look at you tonight." "Baby, look at me." He looked. 6 months. She'd said 6 months. "Ava," he said slowly, "what do you mean 6 months?" She looked at the ceiling. The ceiling had a water stain in the corner shaped like a comma, the kind doctors and nurses pretended not to notice. "I knew, Daniel." He felt his whole body go quiet. The machines kept beeping. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and nobody picked up. "I knew about Margot in February." The sentence landed on him like a glass dropped on a tile floor. "I knew because you started brushing your teeth twice a day and you never brush twice a day. I knew because you changed your cologne and then changed it back, because you couldn't decide which version of yourself you wanted to be when you walked into her apartment. I knew because you used to sit on the edge of the bed at night and stare at your phone, and I pretended to be asleep, because if I told you I was awake, you'd have to choose, and I wasn't ready for you to choose. Not in February, not in March, not in April, not in May when it had already pulled." He couldn't speak. "I didn't say anything because I didn't want you to leave me for the wrong reason. I didn't want the last thing between us to be a lie. I wanted to give you one true thing before I went." She was crying. He was crying. The machines didn't care. The machines just beeped. "I wrote you a letter," she said. "It's in the drawer, the wooden one, second from the top. Don't open it tonight. Open it when you're ready." "When will I be ready?" "You'll know. It might be next week. It might be 10 years. It might be next Tuesday at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep and you finally admit to the ceiling that you need her back." "Need who back?" "Her, Daniel. Whoever the next one is. You're going to find another woman. You're going to pretend you don't need her. You're going to pretend you only need yourself. And one night, you're going to crack open the way you cracked open the night your mother died. And this time, you're going to need somebody. And you're going to need to let them in. And you're not going to know how. Margot is not the next one. Margot is the woman who taught you that you could survive this. She's a good teacher. Don't make her your whole life. He held her hand tighter. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Because you needed to not know. You needed one thing in your life that wasn't broken when you walked into this room tonight. If I had told you, you'd have been here every night holding my hand and pretending to be the man you thought I wanted. And we'd have had none of the nights where you went off and felt something. As long as you were out feeling, you were still living. As long as you were still living, I could pretend I hadn't taken it all from you. Ava, stop. Stop talking like this. Stop talking like this is the last. It's not the last. Then stop. It's okay. Almost okay. Play me our song. He hesitated. Their song. Harvest Moon, Neil Young. The first dance at their wedding, when he had pressed his forehead to the side of her head and whispered, I'll mess this up. I know I'll mess this up. And she had said, You already have. You're doing it right now. And they had both laughed, the kind of laugh that only happens between two people who have decided to keep each other through the worst of it. He pressed play. She closed her eyes. He watched her breathe. The machines beeped. Ruth came in. Ruth checked things. Ruth asked him quietly if he wanted a blanket. He said yes. She brought one. He put it over Ava's legs. Ava opened her eyes a little. You're crying, she whispered. I'm not. You're crying. Same as the wedding. Same as when my dad said his speech. Same as when the dog died. You always think you're not crying. I'm not crying. Daniel. Yes. I love you. I love you the way you don't deserve. I love you in a way that doesn't go away when I'm gone. I love you the way mothers love the kids who break their hearts. I'm not going to say it's okay what you did, because I'm your wife, and I'm allowed to be a little hurt on my way out. But I'm not going to die mad at you. That would be worse. That would be the kind of thing that wouldn't let my mom get to me on the other side. He was shaking. Play the song again, she said. He played it again. Halfway through the second verse, her breathing changed. It got slower. It got shallower. He leaned in. Ava. Shh. Ava, I'm here. Shh. He closed his eyes. He pressed his forehead to the back of her hand. He waited. He listened for the beep he'd been listening for his whole life, the one his mother had made, the one that meant they were leaving. He had been the one holding her hand that night. He had been 12. He had been unable to say anything for the rest of the year. He had stopped raising his hand in class. He had stayed quiet for 35 years. He had never once said out loud, Mom, I miss you, to anyone but Ruth on Tuesday nights when Ava was asleep. He listened now. He listened for the beep. Then her lips moved. Barely. Just a shape. He lifted his head. Her eyes were half open. They were wet. They were not afraid. Daniel, she said. Soft. Almost not a sound. Just her lips. Just the whisper of an exhalation that had been waiting 3 months to land. Just the small, stubborn act of a woman who had decided she was going to take her husband's name with her, all the way down. Daniel, she said again, softer this time. And then her hand went slack in his, and the beep he'd been dreading came and stayed. And Ruth came in and put her hand on his shoulder, and the room got very small, and the faucet in his head, for the first time in 35 years, stopped dripping. He stayed. He didn't leave until they came for the bed. 3 days later, alone in their kitchen, in the house that didn't smell like her anymore, he opened the drawer. The envelope was yellow. Her handwriting was looping, the kind she'd had since the 3rd grade, when her teacher had made her redo every page because her letters wouldn't sit still. She'd put a small sticker on the front, a moon, a harvest moon, slightly crooked, because she had always thought she was funny, even when nobody else did. He opened it. My love, if you're reading this, then I gotta go first, and you gotta stay, and you don't have to feel guilty for staying. I want you to know that. You don't have to feel guilty for staying. You are not the man you think you've been these last 6 months. You were the man who held my hair back when I was sick in 2019, even though you hated it. You were the man who drove 3 hours one Sunday to buy the obscure coffee I liked even when it was out of season. You were the man who cried at his own wedding and never told anyone, and who told me about it the morning after, in a hotel room in Charleston, while I was still in the bathrobe, and who said, "Don't make a big deal of it," and then laughed, because he knew I was already making a big deal of it. You were allowed to be afraid of watching someone die. I am not angry at you for being afraid. I am not angry at you for Margot. I am not angry at you for any of it. I never was. I was just sad, Daniel. I was sad because I wanted more mornings with you. I wanted one more Saturday at the farmer's market. I wanted one more December on the porch with the broken wreath. I wanted more of the small things, the no-account things, the things that don't photograph well. And we ran out of mornings, and that is not your fault. That is just time. There are 2 things I want you to do for me. 1. Don't let me become a ghost. Talk to me, out loud, whenever you want. In the kitchen, in the car, in the bath. I will hear you somehow. I'm not going to tell you how, because you wouldn't believe me. And I want there to be one thing you can't explain. 2. Live. Not the way you think you have to. Not the running kind. Not the kind where you sprint from woman to woman and town to town looking for the faucet handle you keep dropping. The still kind. The kind where you sit in the chair at the kitchen table in the morning and drink your coffee slow enough to taste it. The kind where you call your sister back. The kind where you let someone in again when you're ready. And you don't pretend to be the man you think they want. Just be the man who cried at his own wedding and cried at my funeral, and tried the whole way through, even when he tried badly. You were always enough, Daniel. You were always enough. You just didn't know it, and I couldn't say it louder. I loved you first. I loved you last. I loved you in the middle. I loved you when you were 12 and holding your mother's hand in a hospital chair. I loved you when you were 47 and not holding mine. I'm going to be okay. I'm sorry I won't be here to tell you that in person. You're going to be okay. Neither of us is going to be okay tonight. That's all right. That's just the cost of this thing we did. Whisper my name sometime. I'll whisper yours back. Ava. He folded the letter. He put it in his jacket pocket, against his chest, where he used to feel her heartbeat when they slept. Back when their bed was warm and their windows were cracked in January and the cold air came in and she pressed her feet against his calves to warm them up, and he pretended to complain and she pretended to believe him. He didn't call Margot that night. He didn't call her the next night or the night after that. She called him twice. He let it ring. The 3rd time she left a voice message that was calm, and then another that was not. And then she stopped calling, which meant she understood, which meant he'd lost her, which meant he was right where he was supposed to be, which was the loneliest place he'd ever stood. 2 weeks later, on a gray Tuesday, he drove out to the cemetery. The kind of gray that doesn't commit to rain, the kind of gray that can't decide. He brought nothing. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't know what she would have wanted. He figured she would have wanted him empty-handed and honest. That had always been the thing she'd liked best about him, so that's what he gave her. He sat in the grass beside her stone. Her name was engraved clean, Ava Mercer, 1979 to 2026. Beloved wife, teacher, friend. The groundskeeper had cut the grass that morning. It smelled like cut grass. She would have liked that. She would have closed her eyes and made a small sound, the way she always did when the season smelled like itself. He didn't say anything for a while. He looked at the names on the neighboring stones. He thought about the people buried beneath them. He thought about what he'd say to Ava if he could. He thought about all the things he had not said in 412. He thought about the way the faucet had finally stopped. He thought about how it had not been Margot who turned it off. It had been Ava. It had always been Ava. He just hadn't understood what that meant until the room was empty. He leaned forward. He pressed his forehead to the top of the cold stone, the way he had pressed it to the back of her hand. He let the cold run into him. "Ava," he whispered. The trees did not move. The wind did not pick up. There was no sign, and there was no answer, because she was gone, gone, gone. But somewhere underneath the silence, in some place he couldn't prove to anyone and didn't have to, he heard it. His name. Daniel. Soft as a harvest moon. He stayed for a long time. He didn't get up until the gray turned to dark, and the dark turned into the kind of dark where you couldn't tell if your headlights were working. And he sat there with his forehead against the stone, and he whispered her name once more. Not as a goodbye, but as the small, stubborn, ordinary act of a man who had finally learned how to stay. Somewhere out past the tree line, where nothing had ever listened before, something listened. And somewhere, just past listening, she whispered his name one more time. If you remember one thing before you go, let it be this. The people we lose don't leave because we got it wrong. They leave because time is the way time is. And the only thing we can do for them, and for ourselves, is whisper their name out loud and mean it. Tell me in the comments, who did you whisper to today?